Great. All right, so again, thank you. This is Chainlink Plugged-In. We have an awesome panel for you guys today discussing the expansion of the metaverse put on by us and the lovely people at Polygon. Again, I said it, my name is Jamie Weintraub, one of the event managers of Chainlink. I'm going to let everybody else on the panel take a minute to introduce themselves.
Hey, my name is Ritesh Patel. I'm co-founder of The Ticket Ferry. We are an events platform that bridges Web 2 and Web 3.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm so grateful and happy to see all of you here. Thank you so much, Chainlink, to put it all together with us. My name is Masha Prusso, and I'm head of public relations and events at Polygon and Polygon Studios. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces and new ones. My name is Elena Garidis, and I'm the CFO and one of the co-founders of Defy Trends.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share our story. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SuperWorld. We're a virtual world on top of the real world.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Serge. Everybody, my name is Serge. It's an awesome crowd. I'm a co-founder of Digible. We're the Luther's Metaverse for physically backed NFTs.
All right, so the way I'm just going to let this work is I have a couple questions for each of the panelists about their projects, and then we'll get into the more abstract metaverse topics that everyone can chime in on. Work everybody up here? All right, so let's start with Masha. Why has Polygon taken this leap with Polygon Studios, essentially betting on the boom of the metaverse gaming NFTs? I saw it earlier today. Polygon Studios announced its new CEO, Ryan Wyatt. So if you could just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Today is a big day. The global head of gaming from YouTube, who was with YouTube for 7 years, took this decision to join sort of a startup, still a startup, Polygon Studios. So we are really happy about it to welcome Ryan Wyatt. And what is Polygon and what is Polygon Studios? So who knows the difference between Polygon Studios and Polygon here? Nobody does? Oh my God. Okay, not yet. So first of all, what is Polygon? Polygon is the platform for Ethereum scaling solutions. It's for infrastructure and development. So we offer a different suite of products such as Layer 2, sidechains, optimistics, ZK rollups. We've been going really big on ZK rollups with our privacy ZK rollup Nightfall with Ernst & Young. We recently acquired Mir protocol, Maiden protocol, and we have about $1 billion to deploy and acquire more ZK, zero-knowledge proof solutions in this space. So that's what Polygon is doing. If you think of Avalanche, Solana, Near, Harmony, Polygon is the Layer 2 solution. If you go on your MetaMask, you can change between Ethereum, ERC20, Binance Smart Chain, Polygon. So that's what is Polygon for a regular user. So recently we launched our initiative, Polygon Studios. It's a $100 million fund and ecosystem for gaming, NFT, culture, entertainment. We invest in projects and we also work with corporations. For example, we're now talking with Nike. We recently did a job with Adidas and Prada. Dolce & Gabbana working with Polygon. Macy's are dropping their NFTs on Polygon. So we work with corporations, but we also invest in small startups. We work with Sandbox, Decentraland, if you know the virtual world metaverses, just like SuperWorld app, and we'll let them drop their NFTs on Polygon and pretty much use Polygon just as they use Ethereum, because right now Ethereum is the chain of choice for most artists, corporations, startups, and we're working hard to get Polygon to be the chain of choice because it's much cheaper and it's faster and it's a sidechain Layer 2. We help to scale Ethereum. Yeah, sorry for the long presentation, but now I hope you see a difference between Polygon, the main company, and Polygon Studios is the NFT gaming arm of Polygon.
Thank you, Masha. Moving down the line to Hrish, if you don't mind. You said that earlier, that SuperWorld is a metaverse of the existing world. So my question is, why did you feel compelled to create a metaverse of the existing world? Do you feel like that offers your user base something that otherwise they wouldn't get?
Yeah, sure. So just as a prelude to that, my background prior to SuperWorld was I started a film, television, gaming, and VR studio in Hollywood. My co-founder did Call of Duty, Modern Warfare series, and Ghosts, and my production partner is Michael Bay, the action director. So it'd come from Hollywood creating franchises at the highest levels and looking at how the industry is moving from linear content to interactive content to immersive content. And then what happened was about 6 years ago, Pokemon Go came out, became this huge hit. A lot of people in this room probably know, but it was the fastest company in history to hit $1 billion in revenue. It was also one of their best years ever this year, so they've been doing extremely well. And back then, we thought, you know what? If we can't build the next Pokemon Go, what if we could build a world where anyone could build anything they want? I don't play Pokemon, but maybe I'm into fashion or music or travel or entertainment or education, right? And so what we thought was, what if we could empower anyone to build, create, discover, and monetize anything, anywhere, and then actually own those places as well, own the geography where they're creating content, where they're monetizing content, and allow them to become stakeholders in the platform. And so we added Web3, and this was back in 2017 and 2018. So we've been in the NFT space for a long time, and we've really carried this vision forward. And really, to that, we've also added, how can we improve the real world, right? So SuperWorld, and it sounds ironic, but we're building a virtual world focused on the real world and empowering people in your real lives. This is live to earn, not play to earn. This is passionware. Do your passion and get paid, earn crypto, and improve the world. That's what SuperWorld's about.
Thank you. We're going to keep it moving. Serge, if you wouldn't mind touching on Digible for a second. My question, I think there's some overlap here between SuperWorld and what you guys are doing. In that, there's the existing world concept in both, right? You're doing physical-backed NFT assets. Why do you think your community gets so excited about that? Do you think that we're just not ready for a fully digital world yet, or that the community is just excited that maybe my asset exists in two mediums?
Well, it's not that the asset exists in two mediums, it's that collectors like to have what they collect. And a lot of them is Pokemon cards, sports cards, and other kinds of collectibles. And there's a big friction between trying to trade them and sell them in the real world, mainly eBay, Craigslist, whatnot, involves shipping, handling, etc. Most collectors do not keep their cards on a mantle at home as you would think. They would keep them at home or in storage. You would pay vaults to store them, and it becomes very difficult to trade them. So we are coming from the real world into the crypto world saying, hey, blockchain can do a lot of really good things. It's proof of ownership of a real asset. The NFT becomes the legal title to the actual property. So it's not that you have an NFT and a Pokemon card, the NFT is the Pokemon card. And that way you can trade the NFT, and if whoever wants it, the physical version of it, can redeem the NFT, burn it, and get the physical in.
Okay, thank you. Moving down to Elena, I know that DeFi Trends is focused on primarily actionable insights for investors in the space. There's some overlap here, but I guess the question for you would be, has there been any tidbit of data or trend that you've seen over the last year that's a strong indicator for where the metaverse is going?
Yeah, absolutely. So at DeFi Trends, we have a bunch of different types of data points, some of them being off-chain. So that for us means sentiment analysis, amongst others, on-chain data, where we really look at the transactions, the holdings. And something that was interesting in the past year was that, so for our sentiment analysis, we can go even granular. And for example, we look at corporate sentiment and if that affects the market, which in crypto doesn't usually have too much of a dent in general, but for metaverse coins, once all of these big corporations that the masses use and trust, such as, of course, Facebook, the number one example, but Walmart and others started introducing their plans to get into the metaverse, to patent NFTs, etc., that really caused this huge buzz around anything related to the metaverse, gaming, NFTs, etc., and also translated into price. So that was very interesting to see. That was a yes? I'm not sure. I cannot read sign language.
Thank you.
This was a little magic trick. We just found a new mic. So yeah, that was one thing that was just interesting because the corporate sentiment had been pretty quiet up until then, but just because the metaverse is really also driven by mass adoption, by people that aren't maybe super into tech, transferring their lives that are already largely online through Zoom, through Alexa in their kitchen, and social media to get on the metaverse chain. So that was an interesting insight and really just the beginning.
Thank you. And then finally, Ritesh, you're focused on ticketing, primarily, I think, in real-life events. My question for you, I know that you've dabbled into NFTs. You launched an NFT ticket for the Universal Poetry event at NFT NYC. Where do you see this boom going with events? Is it like similar to that model with in real-life events and NFTs with tickets, or do you see sort of a progression into events in the metaverse, or both, or neither?
All right, this is going to be a multi-layered answer because there's a lot. So we've traditionally been in the physical event space for the best part of 10 years, very much employing Web3 principles before Web3 existed. So we've allowed, for example, if an event's our client, when one of their attendees has purchased a ticket, they've been able to get a full refund on their purchase amount by helping to actually get the event more attendees and help to promote it. So that basically is very much the Web3 principle now, which is shared ownership. The audience participates in the success of the entire organization. Thousands of people are contributing to the success of the event and they're getting paid for it. So we've been doing that for a while. And then obviously over the last few years, there have been virtual concert plays. Some have been executed very badly, but some have been executed very well. So immersive experiences inside Fortnite, for example. And then most recently, the guys at Wave XR did a Justin Bieber concert that was, it was a metaverse created from scratch where Justin was in a studio with motion detectors on his body where he was actually performing, but then that was turning into a 3D avatar inside this virtual world, and there were millions and millions of attendees and viewers. So it's being done very well right now, and it's really immersive and really realistic. And similarly, like there's going to be a play where gaming and play-to-earn environments will end up having rewards that actually are tangible in the real world. So we're working with an artist at the moment, can't announce it yet, but he's building his own metaverse. There's a rewards ecosystem within that metaverse, and part of it is being able to earn the ability to go to his DJ gigs for free if you hold specific NFTs that you've earned within his metaverse. And one thing we rolled out a couple of months back was a way where any physical event could actually supply us with a whitelist of NFT collections and say, we want people who hold a Bored Ape NFT or a mutant ape or whatever it is, and those people can go to our event. And rather than manually verifying that, we built a workflow so that people could connect their crypto wallets. We would look inside their wallet in real time against a whitelist and allow them to claim their ticket if they actually own that NFT. And that works really, really well in the sense that you've got these like really segmented NFT communities, and to hold that NFT, it has value because you get benefits from being in that community. So if that then allows you to attend a really exclusive event, that's a big deal.
Thank you. All right, I hope all those answers sort of shed a little bit of light about all the expertise going on this panel. And with that said, we're going to dive a little bit more into specifics of the metaverse. So could anyone on the panel answer me, I know it's a simple question, but what is the metaverse? And then if you can expand upon that, how does that relate to interoperability between the metaverses?
I can start with very interesting definition with 7 points. Does anybody know Matthew Ball here? Matthew Ball, the VC. So he's one of the top researchers, investors in the metaverse, and he also wrote this essay, The Framework of Metaverse. And this essay was bought, guess by whom? By Polygon Studios for 100 ETH. So now we have an NFT of the Framework of Metaverse by Matthew Ball. And the definition he gave is that it's a sort of a successor state to the mobile internet, a framework for an extremely connected life. And even longer one is that the metaverse is a massively scaled and interoperable network of real-time rendered 3D virtual worlds, which can be experienced persistently by an unlimited number of users with individual sense of presence, continuity of data, such as identity, history, objects, communications, and payments. So that's the long, I would say, maybe even legal definition of the metaverse. What else do we have to add to this? How do you guys
Anyone else
understand it?
Want to bottle that up for the audience?
Well, I'll give you an example of a very subset of the metaverse we're in when the collectibles metaverse. So if you know what Pokemon cards are, and there's Magic the Gathering, so two different physical universes, people usually collect one and not the other, or play one, not the other. Using blockchain, you'll be able to collect and play among different sets of collectibles. You can duel a Magic card versus an NBA card if you want, or a CryptoPunk. So from the perspective of what is a metaverse, it's everything is now connected versus being siloed in very, very different places. And from that perspective, the ease of ownership and ease of ownership transfer and usability, as more things get more and more utility, that creates action and that creates fun on the blockchain, on the platform. And that brings everybody together.
You know, I summarize it as the online-offline interface for all activity. And that's our vision for SuperWorld, is we want to be the gateway to that.
Thank you. I'm happy to keep it moving along. I guess my next question would be, how do we know that a critical mass of users are ready for metaverse experiences? What do we see proceeding in the sector that indicates a broad willingness to be virtual?
So I think we're already seeing that in maybe a context that doesn't necessarily sound like the metaverse. So if you think about the metaverse as all of these definitions we just heard and the disintegration of physical space to have these on and off the metaverse experiences, we've already been prepped. We're already one step in. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of our lives are virtual, especially accelerated through the pandemic. But also, talking about concerts, the Justin Bieber concert, Ariana Grande, that 40 or 30 million people watched. Big brands like Gucci celebrating their 100th anniversary in the metaverse, and just extreme interest. And then all these corporations that the masses already trust and love and feel comfortable with, getting into the metaverse really breaks down maybe some of this fear or hesitation. So people are already living a lot of their lives online. Their digital identities on social media are sometimes more important than real life identities. So I don't see a lot of hesitation there.
I think that also the metaverse really empowers people who may not be confident in real life when interacting with people in person, but it gives them a way to create a different type of expression virtually, and they don't need to look like they do in real life. They could create a 3D representation of themselves that is how they think about themselves inside, and they really want to represent that visually. And for a lot of people, they're incredibly smart, eloquent, people that have a lot to bring to the world, but there's a lot of people that are very shy and the world is not seeing them, and this gives them a way to express themselves in a way they've never been able to do before. And also, just for people who are creating these metaverses and these environments, you get to create something that's impossible. Like, there is something that cannot exist in the real world that you've made, that is, the only limit is the imagination that you have in your designers and your artists, and then tens of millions of people get to experience that and participate in it for free or next to nothing, because there's an economy within that metaverse as well, which means that it's sustainable for those people that are creating it. So it's something that, from a real world perspective, has never been possible before.
Yeah, if I may add, is that if you look into some of us crypto degens avatars on Twitter, on Instagram, like, we all became bored apes or punks. So we see that the people are ready. They're avatars, and they're showing that they want to be like funny images now. And we've seen with the MySpace, we've seen MySpace coming 15 years ago, Facebook, Instagram. We love having our digital identity. That's important. Our stories, like, I love stories on Instagram. I post them every few days. And that's my digital identity. What if I can go outside into a metaverse, put a Google Glass, or even without it, maybe in 100, 200 years, and can be in a virtual world and can be in Australia or anywhere I want in the metaverse. So another interesting thought I had today is that since humanity, we can kind of test and predict things, so maybe subconsciously we're currently creating the metaverse because we're preparing for what the future may bring, such as the global warming when we have to be locked at home, or the ice age, or another variant of COVID where we can't leave our homes anymore. So the metaverse is pretty much the only solution for us to be social, to have fun, and to have good lives.
That got a little dark. Masha, thank you. She's a pessimist. It's okay. Hrish.
Yeah, so, I think that we see the trend, what's happening with COVID, and even in the last 10 and 15 years, we're getting more virtual. Some people call the metaverse a time and space when people are living more virtually than they are in the physical world. I'd like to take a contrarian view on how people think of the metaverse. At SuperWorld, we're really focused on the real world, as I mentioned, in enhancing your real life. And I think that, what we'd like to do, and I don't know if you've seen the movie Social Dilemma in here, it's a Netflix documentary about how we're living in these algorithmic bubbles, about how when you go to lunch with someone, they're going to stare at their phone for 1,000 times, and so are you, because you're looking at the latest notification or what's happening on your email, and how kids are just obsessed with making a next TikTok post or Instagram post, right? And I have 2 kids, and a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. And the last thing I want to do is build a virtual world that sucks them into it. That's not what I want to do. I want to build a virtual world that enhances their real lives, that keeps us in the real world. I'm a humanist, so for me, this is the most important thing. And if we can, add technology to make this better, or we can give accessibility to people who can't be here, but be it in a way that they're in presence, I think what we're optimizing for is real world, real physical world activity. And then on top of that, how do we, bring this metaverse concept where we are building this persistent global, platform interface online and offline? How do we use all that technology if we are, a global brain, right, per se? How do we use that to actually do things to improve the world in the physical world? So I think that's the power of the metaverse, and I think that's where we're going. And, to Masha's point, that collective activity can actually solve these problems of the pandemic, of things that we might, confront as a globe, as a world. and not as individual countries. And so I think it is preparing us for things, but I think that our focus should be on the physical world and the real world, and how do we enhance our real lives.
Thank you. I guess that brings me to my next point. In any popular depiction of the metaverse, be it Ready Player One, Snow Crash, I could go on and on, the metaverse is sort of or seemingly always owned by a corporation. I don't want to disparage any other companies, but a lot of people, their awareness of the metaverse grew significantly with Facebook changing their name to Meta. Do we feel like this corporate-owned metaverse is what's necessary for a retail-friendly metaverse? I would venture the answer is no, but how does that work?
Yes, so I can take a stab at this. I definitely do not hope that we'll see a metaverse owned by or controlled by one or two corporations, but the way that the framework is set right now, with so many different players building in the metaverse, land being sold to individuals and companies as well, and DAOs really becoming more and more paramount in the way that things are happening in Web3 in general, I do see that this is a way more likely scenario, also looking at the trend right now, especially if we use NFTs and crypto as a form of payment to power the economy of the metaverse. Decentralization is in the DNA of Web3, so I'm feeling hopeful.
I guess people don't want the new internet to be owned by a single corporation, or the 5 or 6 that currently control the Web 2 internet. The big problem I see with fully decentralized ownership of the new internet is that no one organization may have enough of a stake in it to care about it enough to take responsibility for things that go wrong, and that's a problem.
Yeah, or maybe another challenge is also that it is more difficult with interoperability if you have kind of everybody building something in silos from each other. So those are 2 challenges, yeah.
I think that corporations have a lot of resources and teams that can actually execute and get things to market based on their previous performance, so existing corporations. For the metaverse to be engaging and interesting, there have to be things that are interesting in there. And it may seem very simple, but it takes a lot of hard work from a lot of people to bring a small product to the market. And corporations are set up to be an organization that takes a lot of human input and puts something out there, something really cool. So from the perspective of the metaverse, you definitely do need corporations and organizations working, either together or by themselves to compete, but folks need to have fun in the metaverse or have useful things to do. That requires a lot of work. And corporations are the best set up to create large-scale, interesting projects and things within the metaverse.
So I guess that pretty much brings me well to my next point. Wouldn't you say that in the metaverse, especially for the people in this room, crypto natives, it's very important, digital ownership, NFTs is paramount. So is that just not the case? Or is that we're just blinded by, as Masha said, we're all just crypto G-gens, and we are really excited about digital networks secured by centralized oracles, subtle Chainlink plugged there, or is that future just not realistic? A future of asset ownership, digital asset ownership within the metaverse. Because if we're going to have a metaverse that's owned by corporations, I would have to think that is not realistic.
I think that corporations, you can't look at corporations as one slate, as all are evil or good. I look at it more as an organization that delivers a product to the market, and everybody has a very, very different approach. So the ownership aspect of it is more of a feeling, a human feeling of ownership. A lot of people can have, different cars that are sitting in a garage and never being used. They know they have them, and that's the feeling of ownership that they have. And it's a very similar feeling with an NFT. Okay, you can't touch it, talk about just an image, but you have the feeling of ownership of it. And that is a human feeling that is very, very native to us as a species. So from that perspective, whether it's corporation or not, that feeling is not going anywhere. And if corporations do understand it, who are getting in there, they will do everything in their power to promote their own products so people feel an ownership of the thing that they have, whether it's been done on a totally decentralized side, or it's done very, very organized by a very organized entity.
I'm a believer of stakeholder capitalism. So, again, as you are bringing together corporations, governments, not-for-profits, community organizations, individuals, I think utilizing Web3, we're enabling everyone to benefit, everyone to come together in a decentralized fashion, everyone to become an owner in the things that they're passionate about, things they're creating. We call it passionware at SuperWorld, which is really, do the things that you love and, help the community that you're involved in and be part of it and create assets that, again, are interchangeable across a very open metaverse, open ecosystem. So, I think that's where it's going. I think that if there are, stakeholders in that ecosystem that want to close off, which, again, those are a centralized system, I think they will, again, be separate from this over-broadened ecosystem that's being created by many of the players. We're one of them. There's a number of organizations, Polygon and others, Chainlink and others that are, I think, really in support of this open ecosystem. That's what we're for.
Yeah, currently at Polygon Studios, together with our advisor, Matthew Ball, and Friends with Benefits, a DAO, we're working on a decentralized DAO alliance where we're building the decentralized metaverse. And the question is a lot about interoperability between different metaverses and who will choose what type of metaverses. Would you go to Meta, where your data, your picture, all your information is actually held by Facebook? And imagine you've been building for years your metaverse world, you invested in this world, and then Facebook decides to censor you and say, it's not good that you, not being appropriate or something on the metaverse with different people in the metaverse, or you are not dressed up or something in the metaverse, and the Facebook will control you and tell you how to behave, and they decide to block you, and then you can never go to your metaverse ever again. And it's been 10 years you've been building your world in the metaverse. So these are the risks of joining the metaverses like the ones built by Facebook and corporations and giving your data away. In opposition to the decentralized metaverses where a lot of different projects are building decentralized metaverses where you own your data and nobody can take it away. But also there is, if you can balance those things and say that, then they can act inappropriately and there is no authority to tell them what to do. So I think with the time, those two types of metaverses, they will be properly established. And right now, some of you are doing yield farming on DeFi. You may have used bridges, right? You can go from Binance Smart Chain to Polygon, from Polygon to Ethereum, back and forth. So you have different chains. Right now, for example, we can't go from a Polygon chain on Sandbox to a different chain on Decentraland. So we can't transfer our NFTs, for example, from Sandbox to Decentraland if the chains are different. So those bridges are not built yet. So interoperability between the chains and interoperability between the different metaverses, it's still in the process, it's still being born, and it's actually very interesting to see which companies would be the front runners in this space who will be able to create this interoperability between metaverses.
Yes, personally I'm very excited for Chainlink's cross-chain interoperability protocol, or CCIP, which is ideally going to be released this year. I can't speak too much more about it, but hopefully solves many of the problems that Masha was just alluding to. My final question for the panelists is sort of all-encompassing. When do we see this, realization or vision of an interoperable metaverse being a reality? And I think there's a couple layers to this. The hardware question is another one. Meta owns the Oculus, so when do we see this becoming a reality?
Well, I think there's many different building blocks or layers, as you said, one of them being the gateways into the metaverse, so the VR, the AR, the Oculuses, and then also the supporting technology. So 5G, you need a good internet connection. You don't want to be buffering in the metaverse. and edge computing being a new technology to store these huge amounts of data that, first of all, the Internet of Things, and then all these interactions in the metaverse will create, as well as 3D graphing abilities, creator economy tools, simplified tools for developers. So there's a lot of work ahead. So I believe it's going to take a while, but adoption is already starting.
So weirdly, this stuff goes in cycles. I was asked a very similar question on a panel about blockchain and music about 4 years ago in Toronto, Canadian Music Week. And the final question was, how long do you think it will take blockchain technology to get mainstream adoption? And one of the things I said at the time was, it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years, because until the UX is solved, firstly, it's not going to happen. And secondly, why should people care? And until you solve both of those things, it's an uphill struggle. And with this as well, with Web3 and Metaverse, we now also have hardware barriers, latency. If I'm not wealthy and I can only afford a certain level of hardware and someone else has got something super high end, we have different experiences. So how do you balance that out?
I think we're already here, actually, because, first of all of you guys and us, we're here, and we're here for the reason of the metaverse. So there's enough people out there in the world that are already in it. The question is, when will we have enough cool things to do in the metaverse, where it's as fun as Instagram for a lot of people right now, or something else? It's still not there yet. We're getting there. We talked about, profile pictures on Twitter, etc. It's a start. But when is it going to become big? I think that's the bigger question, and that is as soon as the next big thing comes out. And these things are coming out almost daily now. There's a lot of people working very, very hard all over the world to come up with original, interesting stuff. And once it is a truly interesting thing, people will catch on by themselves. It'll have its own intrinsic value. We're at the beginning, but we are here. We're no longer pre-beginning. So I think we're here.
All right, I think that's a great way to cap it. If everyone's okay with it, I'm going to open the floor up for some Q&A. I would just refrain from asking any questions that are specific to investments or price action, anything like that. Otherwise, feel free. Way back.
I'm just wondering if there's talk amongst you or other companies that you know about that are looking to put together a committee or some sort of unilateral multinational group that can look at people that are doing bad things.
Could you repeat what kind of things?
Well, he mentioned that when it's a corporation, corporations are owning different parts of the metaverse. Who's going, if it's decentralized, who's going to police, who's going to be looking after things when they go wrong? So what I'm asking is if there's more of a collective, if we're talking about a unilateral group of people going back and forth, are we also talking about a group of people that are neutral or can be trusted to make decisions when things go wrong?
Yeah, I think the response to this question would be possibly the DAO organizations, because what's going on right now in the decentralized world, we have the DAOs. Are you familiar with DAOs? Decentralized autonomous organizations. So it's people who organize themselves in a company. They usually operate in Discord, and I would say that maybe DAOs will be patrolling their those decentralized metaverses. What do you think, guys?
Well, I think that a lot of regulation is going to come internally from the technology itself. We talked about, the roll-ups, for example, zero-knowledge proof. All these things are being built specifically to address the problem of enforcement, because as you go further away into decentralized, it's very hard to get enforced. Once it gets connected to the real world, for example, people stealing people's money, then you have, the traditional forces on the ground that do that. In the metaverse, it's going to be very, very difficult to create a force of police because not everybody's going to respect it. And the way the architecture of the blockchain is set up, anybody can do it. So, we can have everybody agree on one organization to police everything, and then tomorrow say, maybe with you, we'll do another hyperworld, and we're not going to be part of that. So, if you take the money out into the real world, it becomes already traceable in the real world together. It's very hard, but it's still doable. And the question is, how much of impact on the negative side is going to create if it does, and what will be the response of everybody else? So I think it'll be more response type of a thing versus of preparing for something else.
Just to be contrarian, I think the next 5 years will probably be a total disaster with this kind of thing. Because it's been tried already. Facebook tried to set up the Libra organization, which was multiple very well-established companies that had decades of experience in finance and some with a lot of experience in crypto as well. And there were older players like Visa. I think Visa was in there, and there were newer players like Stripe. And people kept withdrawing from the organization because at that scale and with the level of things that the governance that's needed, people just are not going to agree on things. And it's really difficult to get an organization that's cohesive enough, that has one end goal that is like, it's a unified end goal, because everyone has their own interests. People have their market caps they care about, they have their internal egos to care about. I just don't see it being practical, at least for the next 5 years. I don't think technology can enforce it because we're people, and there's just, there's no automation when it comes to that. And it's going to be very hard.
The Web3, we're told, is supposed to be an equalizer for people around the world, not just in advanced countries. So according to Charity Water, there's still 600 million people that have to walk somewhere to get water, don't have clean water, and there's a few billion people around the world that are extremely poor. So it's really fun to talk about we can go into a metaverse and buy Adidas and then go do something else. But as an equalizer, what is being done right now, or what are your thoughts of how to help people get out of that poverty and really be equal around the world? Because I think that there are people that don't have access to internet, and if they just had access to internet, they could do a lot of good in their own local communities that are brilliant people, but they just don't have access to the internet. So is there anything happening right now with this technology that's going to help them?
So I'm not personally aware of initiatives that are really targeting those 1 billion people that you spoke about, but there's a few things. I think on a maybe higher level, it does give access to people to events and resources that they wouldn't be otherwise to access due to they wouldn't be able to travel there, or it's too expensive. So for example, maybe this is not exactly the example you were looking for, but a conference that someone might not be able to attend because there's limited seats and it's so expensive to go and they're so expensive for the tickets. If you're able to have 10 million people at a conference, it's way more affordable. And I could also imagine it to be an effective tool to really communicate to maybe some of the more affluent parts of the world what are the day-to-day conditions, what is the life like for someone who is living under the poverty line. But those are just some ideas, but that's a very good question.
I think what you're talking about is very important, and I think that in terms of access to the internet, I think there are companies out there that are focusing on that. Starlink, like Google, Facebook, they definitely are pouring billions of dollars along with the telecoms to get internet access out there. At SuperWorld, as it pertains to the metaverse, This is exactly what we're focused on. So we're partnered with the World Bank in the Caribbean. We did NFTs with all the countries of the Caribbean to raise capital for disaster recovery, for earthquake relief in Haiti. We're partnered with the United Nations and UNESCO to help rebuild cities like Beirut, Lebanon, that got destroyed in an explosion. We helped clean up water in Flint, Michigan, using NFTs, artwork, to help people understand the issues that were happening there. In fact, a month ago, we brought together 2 tribes in the Amazon jungle that have been at war for 500 years to create artwork in the Amazon jungle, accessible from anywhere in the world, to raise awareness around restoration and reforestation, right? So, again, with partners and everyone as people, we have what's a hashtag called Team SuperWorld. And Team SuperWorld is really about, how do we all come together? SuperWorld's a movement. It's not a technology, right? So even if you can't access the technology, you can believe in the movement, you can get together. And it's really about how do you, inform yourself with these technologies. If we're getting AI contextual environmental knowledge of what's happening in places, if we're moving to the internet of locations and we're able to understand those locations, own those locations, and create content and discover and monetize anything in those locations, we ultimately have superpowers, right? All of us. And so with those superpowers, we can actually solve problems that we want to solve in our communities or communities around the world. Because, as you said, you have access to seeing that content, to understanding and empathizing with that content. VR is often called the empathy machine, because you're able to put yourself in another place, in another time, in another, someone's life. And so I think all of these technologies, one, you have access to internet is important, but, I think that, if you don't, there's still ways to get involved. And again, I welcome you to check out what we're doing at SuperWorld, and we'd love to help, on the waterfront if you want to do something. Yeah.
To add a little...
Sorry,
go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, firstly, that's amazing. So, really well done. Agreed with Starlink, and as much as people like to criticize Elon, he's doing something that's really good. And there are a lot of people who don't care about providing last mile infrastructure to underserved communities because it's not lucrative enough financially. So to be able to do it with the network of satellites, it's really commendable, and I think it's going to make a really big difference. There are NFT projects. There's a VC called Build High, who's teamed up with a woman called Amanda Terry, who's created a project called NFTs for Good, and their first project is called On-Chain Monkeys, and they've been doing a lot in the charitable space. But again, to be contrarian, because that's what I like to do, 99% of the current crypto and blockchain community don't care enough. I had a conversation really late night during the NFT NYC week with a group of people, and this one guy was like, oh, NFTs and crypto are going to dismantle the patriarchy, and it's going to change the world, and everything's going to, we're going to rip control away from the legacy generations and the old school. And I'm like, actually, you don't know what you're talking about, because if you're saying it's going to rebalance the balance, it's going to rebalance gender inequality, it's not, because anyone who can afford to buy a $300,000 Bored Ape NFT is likely to be a white male who got into crypto 7 years ago. So you've actually gone further away from that. And sometimes people need to hear that.
I'm just going to add really quickly. It's a very, very good question, because you're right. If you focus on things like Adidas and Nike and you compare that to to developing and underdeveloped countries, it's very, very tone deaf to talk about these things. But even the retail sector itself, the way a lot of them work is they do go out of these countries to find styles and ideas, don't pay any of the original artists and the creators of this, and then create their own products and market them. And that's been slowly being addressed. And the question there becomes access to technology and access to consumers. So what blockchain does is actually has the ability for artists and creators of things to bring things into a way broader audience to see these things. And for this to actually work, you need to have mobile banking. There's a lot of projects working on mobile banking to let folks who don't have any kind of banking at all be able to transact. And part of mobile banking is, well, you have, again, banks in there. So if you already have access to your phone, you have access to more things, including blockchain. For developing countries, I think the bigger issue is internal regulations for stuff. So I'm an advisor for a nonprofit that does economic development in Africa and other small countries. What they do is regulatory framework mainly for farmers. So if farmers want to create, start planting seeds, it's very difficult to get approval from the government to plant a new variety that's better, that's more disease resistant, et cetera, et cetera. And the regulatory process is very, very opaque. Nobody knows how to do it. And part of the process is letting people be able to navigate a lot of the regulatory issues that face them day to day. And that requires information. How do you do this? And information that's public and available. And I think blockchain has the best shot at creating that informational database for everybody to use and go on.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question, just for the sake of time. Right over here.
So we've seen this last year that DAOs have been growing in popularity. So I'd love to know what role you see DAOs playing in the metaverse.
We want to enable anyone to, again, create DAOs, structures, and operate those on SuperWorld to, again, get together, organize, to create very transparent ways of collectively, creating together, to empowering, communities, to literally, doing anything that is possible in the world, whether it's a business goal, whether it's something for the environment, as the gentleman here mentioned about water. I think there's so many use cases there, and that's the beauty of that structure. And we're seeing, again, in our focus is how do you do things that are real world oriented and providing real world utility. I think that's one thing that gets lost in a lot of this conversation is a lot of these concepts in the NFT world, for example, people question what is the utility of these things, next year, 10 years from now. And many of the NFTs might not have real world utility. So what we're focused in vis-a-vis the DAO question is, again, how do we provide, structures and the ability for people to create DAOs, create organizations that allow them to have long-term, benefits and utility of doing that. So really kind of question the whys of everything. And that's really the framework that we look at when we look at new structures on the blockchain or protocols or, you name it.
Yes, and the metaverse is also extremely community focused. So it's a place to get together. It's not generally a place to hang out alone. And so this can really be enabled by also what was talked about earlier about creativity, this portal of creativity. Anything is possible. And so when you combine these aspects of the community, the creativity, and the ownership, DAOs are going to play a big part in the metaverse.
All right, thanks. So that's our show. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists?